Hello and welcome to Digital Nation, the show that looks through the lens of the nation's local TV channels to see what's happening here across the UK. In this edition, we dig up some fascinating old radios in Brighton. We meet a grandmother who's taking on Parkinson's with her fists. And we find out who's everyone's favourite customer at a pet shop in Cambridge. And as ever, you can talk to us using the hashtag #DigitalNation. First up this week, we've got a survival story, and one that Mr. Grills himself would be proud of. But no, we're not talking about a dangerous mountain summit attempt or a risky ocean rescue. Yes, we are in fact talking about a tough tortoise that was assaulted by a chair.
This is Taribo, a 19-year-old tortoise and a much-loved pet to Nigel Bingham from Sutton in Ashfield. But he recently suffered a severe and unusual injury.
We took delivery of a new recliner sofa. We were sat watching TV as you do on a Monday evening, and I got my recliner out. I decided to put the recliner down to go to the kitchen or whatever, and I just heard this crunch. My immediate reaction was to stop the recliner, get off, and to my horror found that Taribo was underneath, and one of the actuating arms of the sofa had actually pierced his shell. I just felt so dreadfully sorry for the little thing. He's been through so much trauma in his life before, with an incident with a dog some years ago. We refer to him now as Bear Grylls. He's a born survivor.
Taribo was seen by Graham Oliver and his team at the East Midlands referral vets.
Tortoises are challenging to get good quality x-rays of, and we can't really assess their lung tissue, and because this was a penetrating injury effectively into his chest, it enabled us to have a look at the extent to which the lung tissue was affected. This is the image that we had at the time, and the relevance of this is that it's effectively like a penetrating chest injury to a person. And today what we've done is we've replaced those long screws with short countersunk ones. Well, he was very unfortunate, probably the first tortoise in the world to have been attacked by an electric reclining chair.
Taribo's surgery today was successful and he'll now be on a course of antibiotics, so here's to a speedy recovery.
Now, you would be forgiven if you haven't heard of the famous photographer featured in our next clip. But Olive Edis was the artist behind many notable portraits of prominent figures of her time. In fact, she was the first ever official female war photographer, and one museum in Norwich is now celebrating her evocative work.
Her photos of everyone from Norfolk fishermen to world leaders brought her international fame in the early 20th century. But in recent years, Olive Edis has been less than a household name. It's one of the reasons why Norwich Castle opted to host Fishermen and Kings, an exhibition of her work in October. And it's been a hit, with more than 40,500 people having come through the doors.
It's actually up there with our best visitor numbers ever in the castle's history, so we're really pleased, and people seem to have really responded well to the photos. I had one visitor told me that she was reduced to tears at one point by one of the letters about Olive Edis' husband after his death, so it's we've been really delighted with how people have responded.
The exhibition features more than 190 rare photographs taken by the pioneering photographer between 1900 and her death in 1955, including some taken from her studio in Sheringham, as well as some of the camera equipment she used.
It's taken a while, but to be honest, most of the hard work's been done already, i.e. Olive taking these wonderful photographs. And you'd have to mess up really badly not to get a great exhibition from this stuff. Olive started off photographing members of her extended family. She came from quite a well-to-do background. Her reputation probably spread from those early photographs.
As the first ever accredited female war photographer, some of the shots on show capture the heartache and destruction of the battlefields just after World War I. But she also photographed world leaders, from Prime Minister David Lloyd George to the future Edward VIII and George VI. But it's her pictures of men who spent their lives braving the wild waves of the North Sea that have proved most popular.
Crowds flooded to the port of Sunderland recently to watch a piece of history being made. And the star of the show? A vast new pylon that will form part of a new road bridge across the River Wear. Yes, this new bridge will be twice the height of Gateshead Millennium Bridge and even taller than Big Ben.
A pivotal moment for the city of Sunderland. The impressive pylon made its way into the port, watched on by many who'd come out to see a piece of history. This white structure is made from more than 1,000 tonnes of steel and 550 tonnes of concrete. After making the 2-day trip from its construction site in Ghent in Belgium all the way across the cold North Sea to its new home in Sunderland, the pylon will form the centrepiece of the new Weir crossing when it's complete next year.
You cannot sort of overestimate it, because clearly it is an integral part of the economic master plan for the whole city, which will see a step change in the economy of the city. It will see the opening up of the south bank of the river to commerce and industry and housing. It will see the connection between the A19 corridor, trunk roads, and the port of Sunderland. So it's got pluses everywhere, from socially, economically, employment. So it's a win-win-win. People will begin to associate that particular bridge and that particular landmark and site with the city of Sunderland over time. So I think, yes, it will turn into that sort of totemic thing about Sunderland. This is their bridge.
It's hoped the 4-lane bridge connecting Castletown with Pallion will improve journey times and inject new life into Sunderland through investment and regeneration.
What did we do before the invention of powered tools? Well, nowadays, antique furniture crafted by hand centuries ago is among the most valuable you can buy. And would you like to know more? Do you get it? Wood? No? OK, well, let's head to Belfast then to meet someone bringing back non-powered traditional woodcraft.
I've been a woodworker really since I left school, and I've always been interested in traditional woodwork, and my dad was always making things and still is in the garage, so I was always out kind of messing about and wrecking his tools and things whenever I was quite young. And then in recent years I went down a slightly different path with this green woodwork. So I'm working here, I'm getting the products that are very, very close by. As well, I've got some electrical equipment in the workshop, but generally I'm not using that, it's generally all hand tools. So very little electric used as well, and as well, it's a lot more natural process. So rather than me sawing wood and planing it and getting it all nice and square, I'll get a log and I'll split it into sections. And if there's curves and things in that wood, I want to keep those curves in it. It keeps all the strength and stuff in it. So it gives it a lot more rustic feel also. I don't use any sandpaper. I'll finish everything just with the tools. And you can get very smooth finishes, but as well you can see nice big bold tool marks in all the work as well, so that really adds a bit of character to it and makes it a lot more different. But it's not anything new that I'm doing. This is the type of woodwork pre-industrial times. This type of woodwork would have been carried out everywhere. The wood turning lathe that I'm using here, it's a foot-powered lathe with a foot treadle. You would actually call it a pole lathe. Now in my workshop I've actually got a little bungee cord that helps me control it. But usually I have a big long 15-foot pole that would sit over the lathe, and that's why you call it a pole lathe. But that type of lathe is going back thousands of years really, you know. And also the shave horse, which is what I would make most of my furniture on. This rocking chair was made mostly on the shave horse. Another name for that would be called the Cooper's Mare. So it goes back quite a long time as well. Coopers that were making barrels would have used that piece of kit. The beauty about a lot of these pieces of equipment, if I need something, I don't have to go out and buy it. I can just make it myself.
To Scotland now, where STV Glasgow went deep into the beautiful St Mungo's Cathedral, an historic pilgrimage site that has seen thousands of tourists visit over the centuries. And did you know Charles Mackintosh, the inventor of waterproof fabric and the man who gave his name to the Mackintosh raincoat, is buried there? No? Well, you do now.
This is Glasgow Cathedral, also known as St Mungo's Cathedral. His real name was Kentigern. Mungo was a nickname which meant dear one. He came here some 1,500 years ago and built the first church on the site, by the banks of the Mollendiner Burn, which still runs under the roadway beside the necropolis.
What did you know? What could you see by Mollendiner side? To travel far with only faith.
This is the lower church, or the crypt, of Glasgow Cathedral. It's the oldest part of the building. The rest of the church is built above. These pillars are holding the rest of the cathedral up. It's the most important part of the church as well, because this is where the Holy of Holies is located, St Mungo's tomb itself. St Mungo was one of the most important medieval saints there were.
People came from all over the country, from far and wide, to come to this spot to pray to St Mungo to help them. And this is why Glasgow Cathedral is so big. You see, when they started building this place, Glasgow itself was quite tiny by modern standards. There was only a couple of thousand people here. You don't need a church for that. But if you've got thousands of pilgrims coming here every single day to come to this very spot to see St Mungo's tomb, you're going to need a big building, and they don't come much bigger than this. One of the most interesting parts of the lower church is tucked away here in the deepest, farthest corner of the crypt, and it's probably the oldest part of the building. It's St Mungo's well. The life of Mungo tells how when he first came here, he built his first rough hut beside a spring that was coming naturally out of the ground. And when they built the cathedral hundreds of years later, they incorporated that spring into the fabric. So if you stand here, you could be standing in the very same spot that St Mungo stood 1,500 years ago and started all of this.
To travel far with only faith, to spread the gospel wide.
Well, that brings us to the end of part one, but before the break, it is time for our weekly quiz. So, in which Scottish city was the first British Cabinet meeting held outside of London? Was it A, in Inverness, B, Edinburgh, or C, Dundee? Join us to find out the answer after the break. Hello and welcome back to Digital Nation. Now, before the break, we asked you in which Scottish city was the first British Cabinet meeting outside London held? And the answer? It was, of course, A, Inverness. Yes, in 1921, the Prime Minister David Lloyd George was on holiday in Scotland when events across the Irish Sea meant an emergency cabinet meeting had to be held on Inverness Castle Street. Now, we've all got our favourite shops, and it seems that one Cambridge cat has hers too. Yes, Valerie the Cat is a loyal and regular customer at her local pet store and has the entire staff under her thumb. Paw, of course.
Pets at home are used to interesting creatures paying them a visit. But one furry friend has stood out from the crowd.
So Valerie's got a 100% attendance record. So I've been in store now for about 11 months, but Valerie herself has been coming for close to 2 years now. And she's here every day without fail. And if you're here in the morning, she'll come and get in your car and keep warm and keep you company until the next colleague arrives. And she'll be in the shop supervising, make sure you're cleaning out the animals right, and greeting every customer as they come into the store. So we quite frequently get customers that come in just to see Valerie. She has her moments where she loves to be centre of attention. She particularly is fond of the girls in the team, so a few of the other managers and colleagues. She's got them wrapped around her little finger, so she'll follow them around knowing that she gets the treats. She certainly knows when she's on show. She does like that sort of attention when she can get it, and she'll quite happily sit there at the tills or sat in the window watching as people come by and sort of take it all in, let people stroke her as well.
Now, this next clip is a load of rubbish. Literally. But as they say, one man's trash is another man's treasure. And in Brighton, there's a fellow who, with a trip to the tip, started a lifetime fascination with restoring and repairing old radios. So let's tune in to Latest TV.
I went for a walk up the woods with my nan, and there was a rubbish dump. I love rubbish dumps. And on this rubbish dump was a big old wooden radio, this huge thing. And I said to my nan, we've got to take this home. So she lugged it home, poor old thing, had a huge radio. So I'm straight in my dad's shed, hammer, that's the only thing I could find, get the back off the radio, and I was hooked. And that was at 5 years old. Even the smell of the old radios, take the back off, and they've all got that certain smell. It's a kind of 1940s electrical type smell. It's really good. And I've just never been able to leave them alone since. You felt, listening to the DJ, well, especially with the Pirates, you felt part of the radio station. You're not kind of removed. These days, I think there's such a strict format. They've got playlists. they mustn't say this, they can't say that. It's just changed so much. It was far more relaxed in those days. Yeah, basically this is what I do for a living, repair and restore 1940s radios. That's how it came about. Early school days, leave school, into the job, and here I am approaching retirement and I'm still doing the same thing. As far as the future of radio is concerned, I really don't know. It might sound silly, but there won't be radio as such, not as we know it. There'll be, well, phones, iPads, there'll be devices that you just listen to, and you've got the visual there if you want it. So I don't say radio is dying, but the way it is now is going to disappear.
Who do you think came up with those cat's eyes you see on the road? Well, let's go over to Creative Kingdom to find out.
What would you say was the greatest invention of the 20th century? Well, according to a public vote a few years ago, it was none of those. No, it was the idea of Percy Short of Halifax, the cat's eye reflective road stud. According to one story, Percy came across the idea in 1934 when he was driving home in the dark and noticed the reflection of his headlights in the eyes of a moggy that was sitting on a fence, which saved both his life and the cat's. Another story is that he noticed the reflection in tram tracks that had been polished by persistent tram usage. Whatever the reason, he ended up making them in his own factory, and when World War II and the blackouts occurred, the whole country thought they were the cat's whiskers. Proof once again that when it comes to creativity, innovation and keeping the eyes on the road, in Halifax Mint.
Now, we've all seen some of the terrible images of suffering in Syria, and in particular in Aleppo in recent weeks. It's been caught in a brutal deadlock over the last 4 years as war has raged in the region. And that Solent met one woman in Portsmouth who was working hard to encourage people across the community to send some much-needed help to the people in the war-torn city.
It's in a world of its own when you open one of the doors in Venture Tower in Portsmouth. These donations will be packed and shipped to help people in Syria soon. Don't Hate Donate have been sending out aid to different countries for almost a year now, and it all started with the goodwill of Chantel while she was helping out at a refugee camp.
I saw the situation with the refugee crisis and I thought, okay, I've got to do something about it. I called several large charities. They said that all I could do, can't volunteer, all I can do is send a direct debit, and I thought that's not enough. So I got a one-way ticket to a refugee camp.
Chantel says she's working over 80 hours every week to ensure that those who are in desperate need get help. But despite the generous donations, there are still things that are much needed.
We do usually get a lot of clothing, so we get a lot of clothing which is really needed, but we would like more medicine. Medicine is without a doubt priority.
And when the situation in Syria was worsening, the charity organised an event to get support from local people. And the response has been overwhelming, seeing 2 containers full of goods filling up in only 2 weeks.
What I wanted to do was give the tools to everybody, to people that had never been involved with charity before, because many people are feeling helpless and hopeless in this situation. So I said, okay, we'll create an event, bring the things that you no longer need, and Portsmouth delivered. Portsmouth delivered 26 tons of aid in a very, very short amount of time. And I think that many people have actually come back to me and said, you've enabled us to do something. We weren't comfortable with sending money because we don't know what happens to that money. But if you can show me that your aid gets into Syria, which we have many videos showing that, then I want to take part. So it's created a whole new vibe of humanitarians here in Portsmouth, which is just can only be a positive thing.
Next, we get to meet a very exclusive elephant indeed. In fact, she's the last elephant of Scotland. Yes, at a safari partner, Stirling staff are busy looking for a pachyderm pal for Monday, who has grown tired of being on her own. Yes, she sadly lost her animal companion, Toto.
My name's Lynn. I'm a large mammals keeper here at Blair Drummond, so I work with the elephants, the giraffes and the rhinos. So Mondi is now officially Scotland's last elephant, sadly. She lost her companion Toto Easter 2016. So we're really focusing on trying to find a companion for Mondi. It's really important for elephants to be with others. They're a really social species, just like us. Well, ideally, we'd like to have a couple of elephants so that we'd have a small group of 3, all elderly elephants, just to be compatible with Mondi. We're looking for another female because in the wild elephants would live in herds and it would be a matriarchal herd, so it would be all the female members of one family living together, and they might break off but they come back together again, and generally the males are solitary, so we wouldn't be getting a male for Mondi. She's not looking for a boyfriend, she's just looking for a friend, so we would be looking for someone about the same age as her. So Mondi's 45 now, so it won't be a wild elephant that we get to put in with Mondi. It'll be an elephant that's already been in captivity. We're sort of set up to be a retirement home. We've got a really good facility here. It can take a few more elephants, so we'd just like to provide a nice life for an elephant around about the same age as Mondi, to live out the rest of her days. So when the park opens later this year, hopefully we will have a friend for Mondi, fingers crossed.
And finally, we take a trip to meet an inspiring lady in Bristol who has recently taken up boxing. Now, Dawn suffers from Parkinson's disease, but since she discovered strong evidence that an intense exercise can help with her symptoms, she has stepped into the ring and is well and truly fighting the disorder.
I'm about to meet Dawn May, an incredibly inspirational lady who suffers from Parkinson's disease, but she doesn't let that stop her living her life. Dawn is an incredibly positive lady who has recently taken up boxing in addition to her other gym activities to make her fight against the disease even more apparent.
The boxing only came later because I went to the States this September and to a Parkinson's conference. There was a man there called Brian Grant, who is a 6'8" basketball player who developed Parkinson's in his early 30s. He was inspirational. He set up a foundation, and one of the things he did was started an organisation called Rocksteady Boxing. There's lots of evidence that intense, regular exercise can, if not restore the brain cells, at least arrest the degeneration. And because I'm active and determined to fight, it seemed like a good thing to do. Rocksteady Boxing is getting people with Parkinson's to do fairly violent moves at the same time as trying to solve cognitive problems. So you're actually reprogramming your movement and making your brain work at the same time as your body does. I am doing things myself because I am still youngish and energetic. Don't let it get you down. There are wonderful support groups. Try not to despair because I do believe that a cure will be found.
And that's it for this week's show. Thank you for joining us, and don't forget, if you have missed any episodes, you can catch up by visiting the BBC website. That's bbc.co.uk/Digital Nation, or maybe log on to your local TV channel's own website. So until next time, goodbye.